Hey y'all, it's Steph, and it's probably, well, it's about 3 a.m. And uh, I, the other day, watched this video on Netflix, and it was actually Tony Robbins' I Am Not Your Guru. And I recommend anybody who is struggling with anything in their life, watch that video if you're open to that kind of thing. But behind me is a painting, and the painting is my grandmother had described her childhood home to someone, and I think that the person was in Mexico. I'm not sure. I think that that's the story, but she described her childhood home, and they pretty much nailed it from her description. And there's a tire swing, and there's a house, and there's a little barn in the back. And I love that painting, but that's my grandmama's. And what I was thinking about today is everybody has a story, and everyone has a reason to have gratitude. And there was an unfolding of events which was kind of odd and at the same time very effective. I watched that video, and then I watched another one which was called The Secret or something, which everything was talking about gratitude. And I go on to Facebook, which I haven't been on in a while, and I see a picture of me coming out of the hospital. Or maybe I was coming out of a hotel that I stayed in for about a month after I was in the hospital. I'm not really sure, but I do know that it was after I was very sick. And I was overcome with that feeling of gratitude that I had been reading about. I mean, not reading about, that I had been hearing about for the past few days. And it was really overwhelming. But the story's a long story, and at times it's kind of too much information, but I'll just start anyway. Okay, it started, I think it was at the end of the year 2010. My kids had finally gotten diagnosed with autism. And I wasn't feeling real good, I know that I had to have a blood transfusion because I was bleeding profusely every month. And they told me, they did a transfusion, and they told me that there was nothing on my sonogram and CAT scan. I had no insurance, and they told me that. And I went to, somehow I got on Medicaid. I don't know how that happened eventually. And anyway, somehow I got on Medicaid. And I don't know how or when that happened because the sequence of events is really hard for me to remember. But I do remember that I went to a doctor here in town who told me, because I told her what I was going through, she told me that there was obviously something very wrong. And she did her own sono in the office, and they found out that I had fibroid tumors and endometriosis. And I think that what the paper said, I have to go back and look, but what the paper said was something like my uterus was the size of being 2 months pregnant. So we thought that was what was basically killing me, making me have to need transfusions. So, long story short, they did all the things that they had to do, all the testing and everything. And it came back that I had abnormal cells. And we did I I don't remember what it's called, but they did the thing where they cut the cervix, and then they examined, and we found out that I had cervical precancer. Again, not that big of a deal. We needed to do an emergency hysterectomy to get rid of the cervical precancer, right? So I go and have my hysterectomy done, and whenever they're doing my hysterectomy, they found out that I also had another type of cancer, which was adenocarcinoma. What I was informed of was that I had cervical precancer, and I was one wall of cells away from having full-blown cervical cancer. That's what I was informed of. That's all I was told. And after I had my hysterectomy, like, I think I was in the hospital for 2 days, and I didn't feel good. I didn't feel right. I told them, I said, I don't feel right, and I was throwing up, and they told me it was the pain medication, and I went home. Okay, so then I was not feeling well at all, and my fever, I didn't get a fever yet. I just got worse and worse. I was feeling so bad. And the symptoms are gross, so I'm just going to inform you now, the symptoms are gross. I'm passing air, and I didn't know what that was. I didn't know the reason for that, but I figured it was normal. So then I'd gone to take a shower, and I got so weak taking the shower. I was so cold. I was so cold, and I turned off all the cold water, and it was nothing but hot water. And they told me not to get in the bathtub yet because I had had a hysterectomy, but I did. I sat down in the bathtub, and I was so cold, and it was nothing but hot water, and I knew I was burning myself, so I knew that I had to get out of the shower. So I got myself out of the shower. I went into the living room, and I laid down, and I covered myself with blankets. I was staying at my mom's house because the air conditioner had gone on out at my house. And she kept on telling me, it's not cold, and stuff like that. And I was so cold. But every time that I moved, I would throw up. So my fever had gotten to be, I don't know what it was, because she didn't have a thermometer. But my dad came from wherever he was living at the time. It was New Mexico. My dad comes from New Mexico, and he checks on me, and he takes me immediately to the ER, and my fever was, I think it was 104 point something. It's hard to remember, but I'm sitting there. The ER doctor gives me Motrin. Okay, before I got to the ER, I called the doctor that was on call for my doctor. And he says, go to the hospital immediately. As soon as I told him what was happening, he said, go to the hospital immediately. I said, well, we're buying a thermometer. He says, you don't have time. Go to the hospital. So I'm in the car, and we're going to the hospital, and I was feeling really weak. And we get to the hospital, and the ER doctor who sees me gives me Motrin, and he's like talking about sending me home, and I can't stand this doctor to this day. My doctor, the doctor that had told me to come in, comes in, and he says, this is my patient, and somehow, somewhere, the word adenocarcinoma was written down, because I do remember that kind of, and he said that I had cancer, and I started laughing. I said, it's not me. That's not what happened. I had cervical. And he goes, nobody told you? And at that moment, just everything started going really, really slow motion. And he said, you're going upstairs. And I don't think I remember anything until I got upstairs, and I remember nurses and things, and me sitting in a bed, and they're asking me if I was comfortable. I said yes, and they left the room, and as I put my hands down to scoot myself back, a few minutes later, my hands were covered in blood. So I pushed the nurse call button, and I said, I need somebody, and this LVN comes in, and she froze because there's blood everywhere, and she's just standing there, and I said, go get somebody. So she runs to get people, and things start getting really fuzzy to me because I was bleeding out. So, like, I remember nurses, and I remember my heart rate steadily going up and blood pressure going down. And I remember them he said, turn her upside down. And because the doctor was there at that time, the doctor come in, and they put my head lower than my feet, and turned the bed as much as they could to get blood to my brain. And I looked over, and my favorite nurse, I adore her. She's wonderful. She's standing there, and she puts her hand over her mouth. So I immediately kind of got a sense that this is bad, right? I mean, I already knew it was bad. But they're packing me with different things to slow down the bleeding. I remember saying, ouch, because it hurt, and the doctor telling me he was sorry. And as I'm looking at him saying this, he's looking like he's further and further away. And I said to him, I said, you look like I'm looking through a telescope backwards. And I could still form a sentence like that. And he said, close your eyes. I said, no. And I looked at the nurse again, and everything was pixelated. I said, y'all are pixelated. I mean, seriously, like a screen that's pixelated. It was like that. And he kept on telling me, close your eyes. And I said, no. And he yelled, where's my blood? Because they knew that they had to get blood in me, like right then. And he screamed it. And the lady was telling me, one of the nurses was telling me, she was holding my hand, and she said, you're going to be okay. And I looked at her, and I said, no. And I asked the doctor, I said, I'm going to be okay, right? And he turns and looks at me very calmly and says, I don't know. And then he runs out and yells for blood, and I don't remember anything after that. I think I remember, I don't know if I remember coming out on a stretcher or going in on a stretcher, but I don't know. But I remember being in the OR, and the OR nurse is on the phone, and she's being yelled at. He said he needed her there in a certain amount of time, and she said she was in there, just a little bit past that certain amount of time, and she threw her phone. And I kind of went, hey. And this lady goes, she's awake. And it was like, oh my God, she's awake. And they couldn't believe, for one thing, that I was awake, and for another thing, that I was there. And I remember them putting the mask over my mouth and telling me to count backwards, and I said, I'm not, and I'm out again. And I can't remember like coming to from that surgery at all. But what I remember is whenever I'm in the room the next morning, they told me that I had a colostomy, which I had for 4 months, and that whenever they did my hysterectomy, she nicked my colon, and E. coli had eaten my insides. So one of the doctors says to me, somebody out there was looking out for you. And my doctor, the one that had done the surgery, she had a few things to say, but I don't remember what it was. It was like everything that they were saying. They said, you have a colostomy. I said, no, I don't. I have a morphine drip, and it's my best friend, and I named it Andy. And they're like, what are you talking about? But something about coming out of surgery, I don't know if I don't know how long I was in that room or anything, because I was in my room. So the other surgeon, before he leaves, he looked at me. Actually, he was not a surgeon, he was an OB-GYN. I had one surgeon, and that was an OB-GYN. He looks at me, and he says, do not ever do that to me again. And then, like, I started laughing again. But the thing is that the recovery from that was terrible, because, you have part of your intestines. That's so gross. I know it's gross, but like it's like they're outside of your body, so I couldn't be around my kids because they had autism. They were wild, and if they would have kicked me or anything like that. So after I spent all that time in the hospital, I don't remember how long it was. It was forever. And if they would have kicked me, I could have bled out within 15 minutes. I'd be dead because if there's an injury to that part of your body, it'll kill you really fast. And I'd already learned that because I had almost died before. So after I got out of the hospital, I spent about a month in a hotel, which sounds crazy. My dad had gotten me a hotel so that I would be able to recover without being so far, because they told me I had 15 minutes. You have 15 minutes to make it to the hospital before you bleed out. You can't do it from where you live, because I lived more than that far away from town. So, God, it was a crazy journey. The thing is that I had adenocarcinoma, but it was so small that the surgery itself would have gotten rid of it. So, there's some doctors who say no matter what kind of cancer you have to have chemo. And then there's other doctors who say that's not true, because the way it spreads is cell to cell. So, like, if you cut the tumor and then it spreads through blood, that's how cancer spreads. So I didn't have chemo, and you can't do radiation on a body part that's not there. So, if you have a hysterectomy, there's a body part that's not there. So I had that surgery, and then I had the reversal 4 months later. And I remember waking up from the reversal, like, screaming, because of the pain, but I don't remember waking up from the original like that. I think I was just too wiped out. But, I remember holding pillows up to my stomach every time I had to cough or anything. People coming in, my nurses were a lot of fun. They would say, you have to walk, and I would be like, no, you're gonna have to make me. So it took me a long time to get out of the hospital. So one lady comes in, she's all like, we're gonna dance today. I'm like, you've lost your mind. I'm not dancing anywhere. But the thing that happened whenever I woke up the first time, after I understood what had happened to me, was there were certain things that are just completely different whenever you almost die, or whatever that was. The things that are completely different is nothing tastes like it used to. Everything has a different taste. Like, things are so good. I wanted a chili dog, and it was like the best thing I had ever eaten. And then I had this, it was called a bowl. It was ice cream, and it was on a waffle cone, and they put, this sounds so bad, but it was so good. And then they put vanilla ice cream in it, and they cover it with chocolate, and this was at Dairy Queen, and then they cover it in cherries. And this was like the best thing I ever had. My dad brought me that, and I'm like sitting there eating that, and food was not the same. There's nothing that was the same after that point. You get this different perspective. But like the leaves on the trees and everything that I had never really noticed, and blades of grass and colors of green and things like that I had always taken for granted, they're totally different. Everything. Sound is different. The people that you love, you look at differently. Everything was so different. And somehow, between that point and now, I lost that perspective, which I guess you do because of all of the noise of the world and everything going on around you. Like, there's constant noise and there's constant information, and I lost that. And today, whenever I came across the picture, I could really remember the difference between before whenever I appreciated, like whenever I didn't appreciate things before all that happened. And I was kind of an angry person and kind of just, I mean, so much was happening. We, in the middle of all of that, the kid's dad left, and we lost our home, and all of this stuff happened. And it was like a whole bunch of stuff, but what was amazing about it was that none of that mattered. I mean, of course it mattered whenever I needed a place to stay. A few months later, the kids needed a place to stay, and we did get a place to stay. My dad helped out with that too. He's helped us out with everything. But we lost everything. We really did. And the things that were important weren't those things that we lost, like him in the house and all of that. I mean, I'm sure to the kids, it was terrible. It was a terrible thing to go through. And they had just been diagnosed with autism, and we were going through, they were doing therapy all the time, and all of these things were going on. But after I became very gracious for all of the things that I had gained, even though I'd lost so much, I lost that too. And today, seeing the picture after all of that, of me going home, really going home, I guess having a home to go to. I don't know when that happened either. A lot of it's a blur, and I wish it wasn't, but I was so sick. And somehow I lost, though, the ability to appreciate the smallest things. And I don't think I want to do that again. I'm scared that I'll do that again. So I guess that I have to make a conscious effort every day to be appreciative of things, because you really never know. You really never know how long you have. You really never know. And we make such big deals out of such small things, whenever the important things are... My nose is all runny now. Sorry. This is just a gross story all around. Me and my nose running and all that. But, like all of the things that are really important, like the beauty of everything outside, and the person that you want to be, and the way that you want to project yourself. All these things can become so lost with all the excess noise. And really, the whole point to this entire thing is that I don't want to lose that again. I'm scared of losing that again. And that's my story. Oh Lord, it's long, I know. Thank you if you hung around this long. Thank you. And if you left in the beginning because it was gross, I'm gonna apologize now. I'm sorry. Sometimes things in life are not pretty, and sometimes things in life are pretty gross. But it's 5 years later. I'm doing well. My kids are happy. I don't know what else is important. I guess that's it. We've come so far. My kids could do so many things I couldn't do, and it's been such a crazy journey. But glad to get all that off my chest. And I'm gross, and I'm sorry. And much love. And keep on smiling, because that's really important. It really is, because sometimes a smile will actually make you feel happy. Just smile. Anyway, we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.